What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football, sports betting, and NASCAR home. I am your host, Kyle Robert. You follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me, once again, it's Brian Twining. What's up, Brian?
What's up, Kyle? I am extremely excited for today's show as we get to dive into the world of receivers, and there's no better man to do that than our guest today, Mr. Matt Harmon.
Yeah, the king of the reception perception. Matt, we gotta talk about something before we dive into anything. As the noted fantasy football rankings pessimist and how big of a waste of time, was this just a big ruse because you're so good at it? You had to put everyone on, or what? What's going on?
There's a couple different ways we can take this, and I appreciate you guys having me as always. Thank you so much. But the rankings thing is funny. I think it's like kind of the best possible turn for the bit for the whole rankings thing. And I mean, in some ways, I think I've really defeated rankings. Yeah. Like we should all be done with it now.
Yeah,
right? Like I'm curious as to why, and this did not go over with my bosses. It did not pull this one off. Like, why do I ever have to rank anything ever again? Like I've defeated them. I've vanquished the beast that I was trying to crush. But no. So listen. I think most of my gripe is about weekly rankings. So we'll table that for another. We'll have to vanquish that beast at another time. I don't think I'm ever getting number one in that because you really got to try, and I'm not trying to nail these weekly rankings. I'll tell you that. But for whatever, everybody's got all these processes and everything like that, and everybody goes about it a different way. I guess even if I don't care about it, I went about it a pretty decent way.
Yeah, no, you definitely nailed it, and now it's time to log out and never do it again.
And you say that as I've got the I need to finish my projections now before the articles are due on the other window over here. So I wish that was the case. I wish.
Right. Just send your boss an email. I already did it. It's all good. So we are gonna talk reception perception. We are gonna talk second year wide receivers. Very excited. This is one of my favorite conversations of the year. But before we talk anything wide receivers, I also want to dive into the Michael Thomas saga, which that's a whole nother beast. Matt, what player are you excited about that's not a receiver? Running back, quarterback, tight end? Is there someone as the season approaches you're getting more excited about, more passionate about? Think you'll have a lot of shares come when time season starts?
I think the more I think about it, and I know we'll talk about one of these guys this during the show, the more I think about the 49ers, the more I think that they are the team that you need to get right in order to win your fantasy league. Like you need to have the right read on these wide receivers and the way the volume is going to get distributed between Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel. You need to kind of have a strong stand on how that's going to affect George Kittle. You need to nail it right in terms of when/if Trey Lance is going to take the starting job. And then also, how is that going to affect the offensive ecosystem as a whole? I think obviously we expect Trey Lance, if he's the guy that everybody thinks he is, he's going to boost the efficiency of that team. But also at the same time, he's going to change how the volume is distributed between the entire passing game versus the rushing game, everything like that. It's going to change a lot of stuff. And that all is a long way of saying that I am really excited about their running back, Trey Sermon. He's another one of these guys that you need to get right. You need to have a strong stand on when is Trey Sermon what type of role is he going to have? Is he going to take on a clear-cut starting job? I would say probably not, but is he going to be the 1A in a hyper-efficient committee? That's pretty reasonable. And I think where he's going right now, there aren't too many running backs. I think there are obvious guys up front that I'm excited about. Antonio Gibson, I love drafting. I liked taking the discount on Aaron Jones, regardless of the Aaron Rodgers saga. There's so many appealing running back picks early, but the later you get, once you get into that Mike Davis, Myles Gaskin tier of guys, it's everything after that, you're just kind of, you're hoping for the best case scenario in a rocky range of outcomes. I think Sermon's one of these guys that goes after that range that I actually could tell myself a pretty good story about why he could be a potential, quote, league winner or a really big value from where he is. So I think he's just part of this whole equation to me, which is how do we read this Niners situation right? Because I think that's kind of the key to unlocking fantasy football in 2021 in a weird way.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. And Brian, let's just jump into the Niners right now because I think there is a lot to unpack here. What do we do? Is it the Jimmy G show? Do we get Trey Lance from the jump? If we get Trey Lance, does that mean we are less optimistic about Aiyuk and about Debo? And it's more running and the RPO game and more George Kittle across the middle. Or do we see Jimmy G for a full 16 and maybe we get like Patrick Mahomes' first season where he basically didn't play until the last week when the Chiefs had locked up the division and everything was set for the playoffs, and we had basically 15 weeks of Jimmy G. And for the pass catchers, I feel like Jimmy G might be the better way to go. But Brian, what's your read on the Niners kind of in general, and how are you approaching them heading into 2021?
I'm looking at this situation a lot differently than the way that I'm looking at the Chicago situation, which that's a discussion for another time as well. But I actually think that Trey Lance would be more conducive to what these wide receivers on the outside actually do in terms of their skill set. Like they're so good at, especially Aiyuk, at creating separation, as you see from reception perception and stuff like that. And I think the offense would go more towards an old school type of like West Coast shorter routes, just easy completions and letting the receivers do what they do with the ball in their hands. Whereas like with Jimmy G, you're going to see them try to push the ball a little bit more down the field. I think there's going to be less like volume, not to say volume, but just less to go around, if that makes any sense. I just think that with Trey Lance, his ability to create plays with his legs, as opposed to Jimmy G standing back there with robot legs, I think would actually help these receivers in what they like to do in terms of, like I said, giving them the ball in the backfield, carrying it, giving them those screen passes to let them do what they want to do with their legs. And so I'm actually leaning in terms of what I want to see Trey Lance earlier rather than later for these guys to succeed.
Yeah. I mean, I think we forget, like, obviously Jimmy G's floor is a little annoying, but this is also the same guy that went into New Orleans, went toe-to-toe with Drew Brees, threw for 450 yards, had a monster game. So the ceiling is there as well. And from a volume standpoint, Matt, are you optimistic that if we see Trey Lance, maybe even that first 3-4 weeks, that he's a guy that can throw 30-40 times a game if Kyle Shanahan draws it up that way?
Yeah, it's really tough to know for sure, because I think there is a scenario where he comes in there and they run a much more run-heavy offense, and they're already not going to be one of the most pass-heavy teams in the NFL. We know that just based on the way they want to play football. So there's already that sort of in the water anyways. But if they bring in a guy like Trey Lance early on, maybe they give him a pretty limited set of assignments there. They have him as a designed rusher as well. I think they're just a tough team to project because, like I said, I'm doing projections right now, and I think you can kind of give everybody the median case or whatever, but I also think the range is huge for what this team could be. What the Jimmy G version of this offense, I think, could be very different in almost a way that there might be more passing volume to go around if Jimmy G's the starter, but I also think the offense could just be much more efficient, much more dangerous, if Trey Lance is back there. Like maybe they pass fewer times if Trey Lance is back there, but they are a better passing team. Yeah. They mount more scoring drives. Guys like, I mean, it's crazy. George Kittle's never even had, I think, more than 5 touchdowns in a season. So obviously there's been injuries here and there, but they just don't mount many touchdown drives in this offense. That maybe they just run a bunch of times down there in the red zone as well. But at the same time, those chances could turn into more touchdown opportunities for guys like Kittle, Aiyuk, Deebo Samuel. Even if they're not going to all get 120 targets this year, I think that would be very unlikely. So I think it really is just, it's the most difficult team to project, but I do want to make bets on this team being a good offense and the trickle-down effect to those players as well.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I think there is if Trey Lance starts early, it's a Lamar Jackson type scenario where it's very RPO based, very run heavy, and if it's more Jimmy G, the volume of the passing game will be there. I'm going to throw up the Brandon Aiyuk success rate in 2020, and I'll let you break this down just a little bit. Look at that.
That's ridiculous.
With the Trey Lance, if we are a little more RPO, if we're a little more uber efficient. How does Brandon Aiyuk? How does he? I've heard you talk. I know you're very excited about him for this season. I guess how does he fit into a Trey Lance offense, and then how does that kind of trickle down to the Debos, to the Kittles, to the other pieces in this offense?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing here is I believe that they took Trey Lance based on a lot of what Kyle Shanahan said after he took a little bit of a shot on the chin from old Josh Allen there when the Bills and the 49ers played late in the season. He basically said, yeah, sure, you can, I'm super paraphrasing here, but like, you can have the Jimmy G's, you can have the Kirk Cousins, the guys who are going to run the offense, yada, yada, and like hit the points that you want. But at some point, you need a guy that's going to just create out of structure. You need a guy that's going to open more areas of the field than the Shanahan game manager quarterback would typically provide you. I think that's what's interesting about Aiyuk and Trey Lance. If Trey Lance really does become that player, I don't think since the 49ers have had Kyle Shanahan there, they've had like a true number one receiver. I think Debo's a creative touch guy, like created touches player. They did that like to an extreme degree last year. I don't think he's going to be quite that guy. I think he might be more of the player we saw as a rookie where he's getting open against zones. He's actually working a little bit more downfield than he did last year. I don't think he's always just going to be a true gadget receiver. He's more of a gadget receiver than Aiyuk. And that kind of brings me back to Brandon Aiyuk, is that like, yeah, they had Emmanuel Sanders for a little stint there, but they've really never had like an outside receiver who dictates coverages, who wins vertically, wins against press coverage, 86th percentile success rate against press coverage for Brandon Aiyuk as a rookie. I think he is much more on that Calvin Ridley, Stephon Diggs axis of receivers than I ever expected him to be coming into the NFL, because I think he's a full field separator, a guy that wins against man press coverage. As you saw on the route tree, like, he was a player that wins at every single level. So I think that's what's exciting, is that, that's why I think this offense is really important to get right, is because they have one of the best tight ends in football in George Kittle. They potentially have this ascending young rocket ship of a wide receiver in Brandon Aiyuk. And like now, they have a quarterback who might be able to unlock more of that than they have previously. They also have Debo like as a guy who is a real mismatch and like really plays that bully ball style, like brings a physicality and also can bring those layups. Like that's another thing is, you're going to have a guy like Debo Samuel there for Trey Lance and just constantly creating answers. Like this play is not working to the way we think. We dump it off to Debo. He gets us 5-7 yards, whatever. They also have a great rushing game. This offense is going to have so many answers for their quarterback this year. It's tough for me to think like, yeah, let's just throw Jimmy G in there and play it safe. Like, no, let's see what Trey Lance, can do right from the jump. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah, and for sure. And, you want a ceiling offense, because as we saw with young quarterbacks who can prove their merit on the field, you're able to do so much more with the rest of your roster, and from a actual winning game standpoint, make a huge difference. So looking at ADP, Aiyuk going as wide receiver 26 in PPR per fantasy data, and Debo as wide receiver 34. Maybe Aiyuk we should be betting a little bit more on, and being a little more pessimistic on Debo, just because I don't see with that running game being as efficient as we expect. I think what you make your bet on one of these receivers being a fantasy, like legit top 20 guy. And then you expect the other one to kind of fall back a little bit if George Kittle is going to be involved. Now, if injuries happen or whatever, we might have to finagle that a bit. But I think betting on Aiyuk to be a top 25 guy it is one that could make a lot of sense, especially if you expect Trey Lance to be the guy from the jump.
Yeah, and like I just don't care too much about like the sample of games that these three were all healthy together and what that matters. Like we have a very traditional like rookie season last year from a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, who started kind of slow and then picked up steam as the year went on. Like that's how most of these rookies operate. I don't think it's a weird thing that like at certain points Kittle. By the way, Kittle's a great player. We're not necessarily saying that Aiyuk is suddenly going to be the top threat in the passing attack. I think Aiyuk could eventually be that type of player, but Kittle is, like one of the two or best tight ends, one of the two or three best tight ends in football, right? Like we're talking about that type of guy. So I don't really care about that small sample of games from last year. I care more about these guys. And, I don't necessarily think because you want to be ahead of the market on Aiyuk, you want to be below market on Deebo Samuel. I think you actually, again, if you believe in the best case scenario of this offense, which I do believe in the best case scenario of this offense, I think we could start to see that. If that's the way you think this is how this is going to go, you kind of want to be ahead on all of these players, or at least be right in line with where they are going, which is kind of where I think my rankings will come down this year.
Sure. Brian, what about you? Where are you at with the, obviously, we expect we're, optimistic in Trey Lance potentially being the guy, but, Deebo, Aiyuk, Kittle, are you buying in on all of those, or are you going to kind of pick and choose your favorite options?
I mean, just knowing the kind of offense that they run over there with San Francisco and so run oriented that it is, I think for me, it's really going to be between Aiyuk and Kittle as the two guys that I'm targeting from the offense. Cause I see that was interesting how you kind of mentioned about Deebo as that safe guy. And it really popped into my head. It was kind of like the latter years of Anquan Bolden, kind of seeing what Deebo's able to do with just like his body and his physicality and all that kind of stuff, to where he's going over the middle against, double coverage and stuff like that. And then Aiyuk you could look at him as like the younger version of Larry Fitzgerald with that Cardinals team, where they're using him to break down the defenses and stuff like that. So I think in terms of upside, it's definitely Aiyuk, somebody that I'll be targeting, as opposed to, we've talked about this numerous times, Kyle. I'm just not big on taking tight ends really early, which is where you got to go with Kittle. So it'll probably be Aiyuk for me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm obviously a little more optimistic, and I everyone's team Darren Waller over Kittle, which I mean I don't get, but we'll see how that plays out. Let's talk Michael Thomas, because this is obviously some information that's been breaking kind of over the weekend. We haven't had really a chance to dive into it. Matt, I guess for you, there seemed to be a lot of pessimism around Michael Thomas just in general. Drew Brees retiring with the noodle arm, and apparently Michael Thomas isn't good at football anymore. Obviously the injury is a concern, and the timetable is kind of, we'll see, but yeah. I guess, like, where are you at with him and kind of, this season, assuming he was going to be healthy, and then kind of where did it go now?
Yeah, I think if he had been healthy, he would have been somebody that I was really excited to draft, actually, because I'm with you. I think that the narrative that, Michael Thomas is only a slant guy. So let's just talk about this for a second, because like, here's the deal. And you guys know this, like, we're all, the three of us, I'm sure, have all experienced like someone giving us a nickname that we really hated.
Like Boy Young Boy.
Like, well, not even that. Like, think about the West Virginia thing, like with James Coe and like in the NFL days. I'm from the state of Virginia, but the fact that when James Coe said, like, he would call me West Virginia's finest or whatever, and it clearly bothered me. That's how you've got a good nickname. Yeah. When it bothers the person you're giving the nickname to. So unfortunately, because Slant Boy clearly bothers Michael Thomas so much, it's an objectively good nickname. But is it a real demonstration of like how he plays the game? No, I don't think so. Reception perception would actually show you, that he runs far more than just slant routes. He runs like 29% of his routes last year were slants, but at the same time, number one, it's like third in terms of the highest amount of slant route ratio, and among the receivers charted last year. It's high, but also he gets open on all of the routes, almost every single route on the, like every single route on the route tree, he has an above average success rate other than one. Last year's a comeback route. At other times it's been the corner route. Like, he's consistently been one of the best separators across the route tree in the NFL. And I think, Kyle, as you mentioned, Drew Brees' arm has been in decline, undeniably the last 3 years, really, which is intersecting with Michael Thomas's prime years. I think the reason Michael Thomas drew so many targets on slant routes could say a lot more about Drew Brees than it could say about the wide receiver here and Michael Thomas. Like, I was actually really interested to see what would Michael Thomas do if Jameis Winston is his quarterback. Would he actually get more downfield targets? I think that was probably something that was going to happen. Unfortunately, now at this point, we're just kind of in the wilderness here with Thomas's timeline. I also think too, like, I tell you what, I'm not really a Jameis Winston guy in general. I certainly don't like the idea of Jameis Winston now taking over an offense that has like Traquan Smith and Marquez Callaway and Adam Troutman. Like, their receiver core without Thomas in the picture is about as bad as it can get. as at least, I mean, some of these guys are young and have potential. So they're not like the Lions top duo of like Brashad Perryman and Tyrell Williams, like just these kind of they're like fighting for the bottom in terms of weakest wide receiver rooms in the NFL right now without Thomas in the picture. It's a good thing they have Alvin Kamara to probably catch 100 passes this year. I don't know. Now I think at this point we're going to get like the Taysom Hill trickeration type of offense too. I don't know that I can really draft Thomas at this point. I was extremely excited to draft him earlier. I've kind of dropped him now because we just have no idea when he's going to play.
Yeah.
I kind of dropped him to that DJ Chark, Deebo Samuel sort of range of the draft where, you have to be really risk tolerant to take him there. And I probably just am not going to be the one that takes that ride this year.
Yeah, no, I will probably be overweight on Michael Thomas. I like I said, I believed in the player. I thought that the ADP was crazy already. I mean, I remember the days when he and the other Mike Thomas were coming out in the draft, and Michael Thomas was the bad version of Michael Thomas. Wow, that was a day ago. But Brian, I guess for you, I'm going to be overweight. I'm going to have a lot of him. I'm going to be taking him. I'm very curious to see where the ADP ends up falling. Ian Rappaport's on NFL saying like November is the earliest he could play. I know they have I think they have 5 or 6 games before their bye. So, a lot of times teams will kind of take advantage of that bye as extra week, get them in. Now I'm optimistic. I'm thinking maybe, we saw Deebo miss, I think the first 4 weeks last season and then came back. I'm optimistic that we could see him as early as October. If you assume that he got the surgery basically at the beginning of June, July, August, September, he'd be back by October, maybe even late September, depending on how they want to work it. So I'm optimistic to take him. Matt's going to be avoiding. Brian, break the tie.
I think it's really going to be determined on how I begin my drafts, and knowing that I'm normally a wide receiver heavy guy early on, I would be more likely to take the risk with him as being my wide receiver 3 or even wide receiver 4, depending on how far down the list he actually goes. And to Matt's point, like I was really excited to see what Thomas was going to do with Jameis Winston. We saw what Jameis did with Mike Evans there in Tampa Bay. I mean, maybe he could just unlock this new level of Michael Thomas. And going back to his success rates in pretty much every aspect of being a wide receiver, it's amazing to me that people talk so much crap on this guy when he was literally the only wide receiver on this team for multiple years now under Drew Brees. So it's not like teams didn't know where the ball was going, and yet he was still able to get open, create separation, have these tremendous seasons. And now with the ankle injury, it's really difficult, but I'll likely be kind of heavy on him knowing he'll be my wide receiver 3 in most of my teams.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. If I start Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, if I start Stephon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins, DK Metcalf, something like that, I will be ecstatic to have him as my 3 or 4. If I start with a top 5 pick maybe, and I take McCaffrey, or I take Dalvin, or take Alvin Kamara, who, as Matt said, might be a lot more of a PPR monster than with this injury, I might be a little risk averse and maybe go with somebody that I think could be playing all 16 games or the majority of those. Let's talk about Justin Jefferson, Matt, because obviously incredible rookie year. 88 catches, 1,400 yards, beat Anquan Bolden, Randy Moss, Odell's rookie numbers. Only one receiver since 1960 has had more receiving yards in their first season. And with the aforementioned Kirk Cousins as his quarterback, this Matt makes it even more impressive. I guess, what was your kind of takeaway from the Justin Jefferson reception perception and kind of what you saw in his rookie season?
I mean, this guy is such a stud. I can't believe that people thought he was not going to, line up outside in the NFL.
It's really funny the takes people have like before a player becomes in the NFL.
I mean, I get it. Like, he ran so much slot receiver in college his final year in 2019. But, man, everything about the way he was a true technician, the way that he could get open, it just screamed like the next Keenan Allen, And I mean, Keenan Allen has been a guy that's run out of the slot a decent amount in his career, but it's not because he has to. It's because he is a unique matchup nightmare there. And I think Jefferson could be that player eventually too. But man, I mean, his reception perception as a rookie, I think it was legitimately elite. It was I would say right up there, if not just slightly behind Odell Beckham's rookie season from 2014. Beckham still maintains a top 3 success rate versus man coverage score from his rookie year. So Jefferson, though, is not far behind. 91st percentile against man coverage, 82.3% success rate versus press. That was the second best behind only Stephon Diggs among charted players last year. I mean, he legitimately came in and was as good as the player Stephon Diggs was for the Vikings. And in a way, like the Vikings kind of got lucky right there, because I know that it's often like heralded as this big win-win trade, right? And the result was a big win-win for Diggs. He goes on and gets to get everything he wanted, get the hell out of Minnesota, go put up big numbers with another quarterback, and the Vikings still maintain an elite receiver. There is an alternate universe where the Eagles for once do the right thing and had just taken Justin Jefferson, and then the Vikings are stuck with Jalen Reagor, or the Vikings don't take a receiver there, and it doesn't look like a win-win. So sometimes you need some things to work out for in your favor. You need to get a little lucky there, too. I think the Vikings got lucky that the Eagles passed up on Justin Jefferson because, this guy, I think, is the next superstar receiver. If he's not up there already, I think he is already in the conversation as like a top 15 receiver in the NFL. His rookie season was not just, some efficiency boosted flash in the pan. He is legitimately a great number 1 receiver in the league already. I don't think there's I wouldn't be putting any like limitations on what this guy can do. I think he's going to be right up there with the best players very soon if he's not already.
Yeah. And Brian, I think having Adam Thielen on the other side is not a bad thing either. It's a good compliment and a great option to learn from as you kind of become an NFL wideout. Brian, well, I guess heading into the season, we've kind of gone through some of our position rankings and stuff on previous episodes, but Justin Jefferson's a guy that, we talked about starting wide receiver heavy, could be a great option as your second guy off the board.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson is one of those dudes. I have him ranked as my wide receiver 5 right now. At the numbers that he put up last year, I'm actually expecting to see him see more in terms of like receptions and them to get him involved earlier in the season. Because like Matt said, when talking about Brandon Aiyuk, the natural rookie progression for these guys is to be, kind of eased into the system, eased into playing time. And that's what we saw with Jefferson. I mean, over 4 of his first 5 games, he only saw 5 or less targets. So that just shows you what he did over the latter half of the season. And I think he's just going to carry that over into the beginning of this year. And now, especially with that 17th game in Minnesota in an improved division with Chicago, we'll see what they do. The Packers, with the news today that Aaron Rodgers is going to report, they're going to be having to win every single game is going to matter. So this team is going to be playing 17. So I think Jefferson is going to explode onto the scene.
Yep, totally agree. Now let's talk about another guy that had an impressive season as a rookie, but more from a touchdown perspective, and that's Chase Claypool. Scored 11 touchdowns in his rookie season, between rushing and receiving. Rookie wide receivers to score 10 touchdowns or more include Randy Moss, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Odell. The Mike Williams that was in Tampa Bay for like 5 minutes and now is out of the league. Eddie Kennison, former Buckeye great, and Calvin Ridley. That's a pretty good, pretty good class there, Matt, of receivers that, outside of Mike Williams became like legit options. What's your read on the Steelers receivers, I guess, in general, and how does Claypool fit in there? Because I swear every day I'm reordering them in my brain.
This is another team sort of like the 49ers that I think is so important to get right, because something doesn't add up here when you look at just looking at like ADP or consensus fantasy rankings. It's like they've got 3 top 40 receivers, including 2 in the top 30 pretty much everywhere. Deontay and Claypool's right around there as well. They've also got a running back that everybody already consensus ranked top 15 guy, but they've got a quarterback that nobody wants to touch. That doesn't make any sense, right? Yeah. Like either Roethlisberger is going to have to outkick expectations, or Najee Harris he might get up there just in terms of volume, but like if Roethlisberger stinks, they're not going to score very many touchdowns, right? Like he's going to touch the ball 350 times and score 7 times or something like that. He'll deliver you a fine season, but not quite what everybody hopes for. So they've got either Roethlisberger is going to have to weigh out kick expectations, or Harris, the receivers. It's not going to be a fun time having them on your fantasy team this year. So, like, which one is the truth? Is Roethlisberger undervalued, or are all these guys basically overvalued? I actually kind of think, like, God, I hate to say it because, like, I really wanted Roethlisberger to just ride off into the sunset. He had his little teary goodbye there on, that playoff loss to Cleveland or whatever. Like, the guy's legit crying on the sideline. He was not a fun player to watch last year. I think he really left a lot to be desired, but what if he is a little bit better this year coming off the elbow injury? I love classic Big Ben line where he says, I don't want to make any excuses, but here's my excuse for why was the elbow injury, But what if he's coming in shape, whatever, we'll see. I don't know. I think this is a situation to really monitor this offseason. Like, what's the tenor and the tone around Roethlisberger? Because, man, I think Chase Claypool and Diontae Johnson could be like the emerging young duo in the league right now. Juju's still there. That does complicate things from the target distribution angle. I know Juju's yakking a bit about like he wants to play outside more. We'll see. I don't know, but I think Claypool and Diontae Johnson are both great players. Johnson is already up there in terms of one of the best separators in the NFL, number 1 in success rate versus zone coverage last year, got open across the route tree, despite the fact he, like Michael Thomas, was mostly seeing a bunch of short targets. Again, I think that has so much to do with the quarterback and everything like that. And then you've got Chase Claypool, very similar season in reception perception to DK Metcalf. I know that's like a popular comparison because both big, athletic, fast guys, but I think the RP numbers really do back it up. He obviously had some great deep route success rates on the 9s, but also some of the shorter routes as well. And when you look at what he did against man and press coverage, 71.3% success rate versus man, that's a really solid like threshold that you want to see guys get over that 70% mark if you're going to expect them to be future 1,000-yard routine contributors to the NFL. 80th percentile against press. I think he showed that he can really operate as their number 1 X receiver. And also, I want to see now, does Claypool take that step that DK took in his second year where they had him mostly running slants and 9s last year? Mm-hmm. Over 50% of his charted routes for both of these guys in their rookie year were slant routes and 9 routes. Now I want to see them sort of expand that portfolio like they did with DK Metcalf. If people go to receptionperception.com and they check out the Chase Claypool profile, I broke down that a little bit more there. I think that Claypool's a guy I think you want to bet on. I also think Deontay's a guy you want to bet on. And I know it's really tough because the quarterback situation is a short and long-term question mark. But I do think that if they get the play calling right, if they get the offensive design right, like meet Ben halfway, but also bring in some more progressive ideas that Matt Canada, I think, has in terms of motion and play action, everything like that. If they meet in the middle somewhere, I actually think Roethlisberger could have a passable season, and then the Steelers figure out the quarterback position later on after trying to make one more run at it here.
Yeah, no. So you brought up a ton of really good points. I do think it's funny that there was a Claypool needs to play tight end discussion heading into last season.
So bad. Yeah. That's rough.
He silenced those critics really quick. But Brian, we've talked about this. If we love the running back, if we love the receivers, if we love the pieces in the offense, we have to bet on the quarterback also being good. Now, if you think Big Ben just stinks and is going to be awful and they don't make a trade for, Jimmy G or somebody that can be passable, then you have to downgrade all these guys. And I feel like part of it is there are certain people making bets on which of these Steelers receivers they like best. And if I like Juju or I like Deontay or I like Claypool, then I'm going to draft him. And that's kind of why they're all kind of falling into a similar range. But I think if we like all these guys, at least, we loved Deontay last year. If he's seeing double-digit targets and Claypool has that double-digit touchdown upside and Juju can be effective, like we have to rank Big Ben. And we talked about him in our sleeper options, but Big Ben's got to be somebody you like. And if you think Big Ben's just trash, then you need to kind of avoid all these guys at their ADP.
Yeah, this is like you said, we talk about this all the time, and it's just really baffling to see where Roethlisberger is going. Like currently behind Cam Newton, QB 28, and if everyone's watched our previous videos, they all know what I think about Cam this year. So I think Ben Roethlisberger needs to be kind of propelled also into that like low end possibility QB1/QB2 conversation. I know he's not going to get the rushing totals, but when looking at a guy like Deontay Johnson, he's led the team in targets for 2 consecutive years now. Chase Claypool burst onto the scene as that big bodied guy like Martavis Bryant a few years back, where we saw Roethlisberger just pepper him with targets down the field. And then, like you said, you still got Juju, you got Najee Harris, a reinvigorated running game, and this offense, although I think the volume takes a slight dip, I do think that the depth of target increase that we should see here will counterbalance the lack of targets going out to these guys, and they'll start seeing, more yards per reception and such. So for me, Johnson is one of those guys who I think cracks the top 12 this year and finishes as a wide receiver 1, just knowing what Roethlisberger likes in him. And then, like you said, with Claypool, another double-digit touchdown season is on the forefront.
Yeah, and it is funny, as Matt mentioned. It would be nice if they mixed in a little more current concepts. This is a Steelers offense that ran the least amount of play action pass on first down, and when you have Najee there, you need to utilize that, get the defense off balance, and kind of mix it up. Matt, I'm going to throw out a few names. You tell me who your favorite option to kind of take the leap in year 2. And that's Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Reagor, Henry Ruggs, Michael Pittman. We can talk Laviska Shenault. Like, is there a second-year guy that you're just really excited to see kind of take the leap and become a lot more than we saw last year?
Yeah, I think Jerry Jeudy's interesting because he's a guy that sort of, this is another really tough situation that we have to get right, is what is going to go on in Denver this year. Because I don't know, man. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think that a Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater led offense can support, again, 2 top 40 receivers in Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy and a top 10 tight end in Noah Fant. Somebody's going to take it.
Last year in Carolina, Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, all top 30 guys. Now, Teddy wasn't amazing.
Yeah, the only thing about that, though, and that's a very fair counterpoint, but Carolina was consistently put in situations because of their defense where they had to throw the ball more. That's not going to be the same type of situation in Denver, where we have one of the best defenses in the NFL. They should be a team that relies a lot on their running game and Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, because we expect them to be playing pretty solid competitive football. So definitely, I think that's the thing, is just somebody in this. I don't think these guys are going to all bottom out, but I think somebody, one of the 3 between Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, or Noah Fant, isn't going to quite meet expectations this year. And I haven't gotten my head around which one that could be. Now, theoretically, a guy like Jerry Jeudy fits in really well with Teddy Bridgewater. He's a guy that is a separator, 87th percentile success rate versus man last year. That's a really, really good indicator that this is going to be a long-term quality player. I think the fact that he gets open, on some of those slants and drags, the crossers over the middle, he's great in those areas. And Teddy Bridgewater was instantly connected with guys like Curtis Samuel and Robbie Anderson on those type of plays last year. Again, I think he would fit in really well stylistically with a quarterback like Bridgewater. So maybe that's the tiebreaker between him and Cortland Sutton. Cortland Sutton just has such a great profile as a true X receiver that wins vertically in contested situations, and was, I think, his from year 1 to year 2 jump in reception perception was so encouraging. I was hoping to see, him take that next step, a la a guy like Kenny Gallaudet has to this point in his career. Obviously, the injury last year threw a wrench in it. So it's really tough. Those 2 guys, which one do you prefer and which one do you want to put that stamp on? I think I'm close to putting the stamp on Jeudy, but I go back and forth, man. I go back and forth really, really hard on those 2 receivers, especially because it's a Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater led offense. It's really hard to want to like them both. I think you can obviously get excited. The damn Panthers last year had 4 guys go over 1,000 yards from scrimmage. That's pretty encouraging, but also they had Joe Brady last year. The Broncos have Pat Shermer. There's a lot of potential negatives when you're just looking at a passing offense for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, no, I think you're onto it. Like, you have to place your bets on who you think is going to be under center. I think if you like Drew Lock, I think, even if he's not great, could be really good for Cortland Sutton in his fantasy production. Now, if you aren't optimistic about Lock, you think we see Bridgewater for 13, 14, 15 games, whatever, then you maybe bet on Jerry Jeudy, on Noah Fant, and maybe even a little KJ Hamler sighting. You just gotta pick and choose. But yeah, as you mentioned, this is a really good defense. This is an older, Pat Shermer's running the show. Maybe this is a very conservative offense that doesn't do a lot, that keeps it very close to the chest, and that may be even more Teddy Bridgewater. But yeah, you have to make your bets on who you like.
Yeah.
Brian, what are you doing with Denver? I mean, is it just take the running backs and kind of take other receivers that you think might have a little more upside?
I'm not taking Melvin Gordon. I just don't see him continuing to be a thorn in fantasy owners' side by just continuing to stick around. I like Javonte Williams, but it's just so hard with this offense, just knowing who's playing quarterback. And no offense to Teddy Bridgewater, but Carolina they weren't good. And this team, they want to run the ball. And if they're falling behind because of the offense not being able to move the ball, they're going to have to get into the passing game more often, thus eliminating the running game. And then when talking about the wide receivers, both Sutton and Jeudy are going around the same area. So I think for me, especially if I'm playing in like a half PPR or PPR league, I'd probably lean Jeudy, just knowing what his skill set is with the offense. I think he'll see slightly more volume in terms of like total receptions. But if I'm playing like a standard or even maybe half, like in terms of like popping on a week-to-week basis, I think Sutton is more of that go downfield, jump ball situation in the red zone, stuff like that. So I'd probably lean Cortland Sutton, but that's just me because last year I had him ranked inside the top 12 as a guy who is really going to explode. So I'm going one more time with that possibility.
Going back to the well.
Yeah, so I think I give him one more year, and then the way we saw Jeudy kind of explode last year, I think he takes over as the number one there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm optimistic that we get a better offense, whether it is Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater. But yeah, it's definitely not one you're gonna want to go crazy in best ball or anything with. Okay, Matt, this was a ton of fun. Obviously, love our yearly chats. Tell everybody about reception perception and what you got going on over there, because I don't pay for many fantasy football subscriptions, but that is the one of the ones I pay for, and it's been worth every penny so far.
Well, I appreciate you and everybody else who supports the website. It is exciting to be operating on its own this year. Receptionperception.com. For the first time really ever, it's in its own spot, own website. James Coe and I are running the show over there. We're a partnership deal, and we're loving it. We're having so much fun. Not just obviously for me, charting the players and writing all the profiles. James is writing for the site now as well. We also do a weekly live stream Tuesdays, usually at 3 p.m. Pacific. We might change that up during the regular season, but we do a weekly live stream that's just for our paying subscribers, so you're not going to get that anywhere else. Also operating a Discord channel as well that's going to be great during the season, to actually be able to help each other out. And I love that people are, even when I'm not in there talking to folks, or James is not in there talking to folks, like they're in there kind of sharing ideas, breaking down some reception perception metrics, or just, looking at different dynasty trades, whatever it is. It's great. It's awesome to build that community. But yeah, for me, having reception perception in its own outlet, being its own independent site, I think has really helped take the series to the next level. Being able to just easily go, like if you heard the Jerry Jeudy debate we just had back and forth right now, and you want to go on the website and punch in Jerry Jeudy, you can find his profile very easily. You can find Cortland Sutton's profile very easily, like where these guys stack up to the rest of the receivers of the league. And we have so much more coming, for the lead up to fantasy drafts and everything like that. I think if you haven't subscribed yet to receptionperception.com, there's some free stuff that you can check out as well on the article section. James's article that he just put up there about why success rate versus man coverage is such an important metric. you can go in and find out if you like the stuff, and I think you will really want to subscribe and get a part of the full production there.
Yeah, and there's a ton of 2020 player profiles if you want to go look up, trying to figure out who you want to buy in on, who might have been a little bit of a flash in the pan.
And more coming too. Whenever damn NFL figures out its Game Pass situation here, when they reboot it for the new year, we'll get guys like Jacoby Myers, McCole Hardman, some of these guys that are sort of the lower tier players in ADP or rankings right now. That's going to be a big focus of mine in August. That's something that I haven't done in previous partnerships or previous offerings for reception perception. Get some of these lower round guys in there later on in August. Guys are buzzing in camp or something. We could throw up an RP profile in the next couple of days after that to really see what the truth is.
Yeah, so fantastic resource. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. Obviously, check out all of Matt's work over at Yahoo Fantasy. Brian and I will be back with more podcasts each and every week. We're up to like 2 or 3 a week now, it seems like. Every time Brian and I are talking, we're cranking out more stuff. So make sure you check out that. Make sure you head over to Fake Pigskin for all of our in-season stuff. For Brian Twining, for Matt Harmon, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.